Are we online? Are we in the stream? Yes, we are. Hello again, Vienna, for one last time on behalf of the Austrian Wirtschaft Service and on behalf of me as your host of today's Connect Day and the night that will start right now. And what shall I say? I am really, really overwhelmed. The Connect Day started, I think, 3 years ago as a small idea and a little bit of courage to sell that, to the upper levels of the company. And yeah, we dared. We simply didn't talk much, we just simply did. And after 2 years of Corona, this is the first time I'm so happy to see so many people on site in a real event with real people in real talks. Thank you very much for coming. But now, I think we should really kick off the last session, and after seeing some great green tech startups and corporates presented by the Green Tech Cluster in the morning, great international startups by Vienna Business Agency and the Global Incubator Network, and some top-notch corporates during the AWS AI Marketplace and AIT Manufacturing reverse pitch, looking for partnerships. Now, finally, I think we should focus on investments. So, what's coming up? Before we do that, I have to say thank you, actually, to our partners, signature partners, AWS, FFG, and Global Incubator Network, to some of our strategic partners, you know them all, so I won't repeat the names. And as now the bar is open and there are drinks, special thanks to also EY, TPA, and the Global Incubator Network supporting the bar. Florian, we meet later on stage, I guess. And I think that my slides are gone, and it's not my deck set. Could that be? I guess it is so. But I think there is somebody I've missed in the row to mention. It's my next guest. Yeah, Florian, actually, from EY, head of startups, head of communications, Florian Haas from EY. And that's my slide deck, I guess. But Florian, before we start talking, I have to explain why we're sitting on these chairs and we're moving that much. This is unpaid product placement by Bergadi, a startup from Austria. This is their prototype. They're looking for investment for rocking off their production. It's IP inside of this. And you can sit actively and walk while you're sitting. You can fix it as well. I don't do that because I love this, moving thing. And when you work in the office and you put your table up, it goes upstairs, man, really high. Like, standing height. I love it. Bergadi, the guy sit there. Maybe you want to invest in them, but now to my special guest, Florian.
Yes.
Welcome to Connect Day.
Thank you, Dusan.
So, what are your first impressions here? What do you say?
My first impression is that I love this chair. Thanks, guys. So it's comfortable and makes you look movable. The hips don't lie, right?
Oh.
The impression of this day is great. I think it's really cool to be back together physically and to have the opportunity to do the networking not only via Zoom or Teams. So it's a really good spirit here. I had a lot of interesting discussions during the networking and Connect sessions. I booked all of them, so my head is already a little bit swirling, and I'm competing now against the bar, so it's not so easy.
So you had 12 meetings?
Yes.
You're still able to do your...
No.
Okay, fine.
No.
So excuse him in advance, please. But let's kind of get a little bit, more serious because I really share your opinion. I was talking to a few of our guests here, investors and startups and corporates, and all of them were like amazingly a lot of people to talk to and a really high quality of contacts and leads. But that's not about us, it's all about you. So thank you very much for being those great people in this event. So Florian, let's talk a little bit business.
Yes.
I once studied at the University of WU Wien, like economics, and they told us EY is one of the big four advisories, actually, and they do the big corporates. You go there, you do the big corporates. But I've realized that, startups and scale-ups, this seem to be pretty kind of important thing for EY. I think you're even organizing on the 10th of June the EY Scale-Up Award. So why the hell startups and scale-ups?
Excellent question. No, as you said, I mean, this is still true. So we're one of the biggest consulting and auditing firms in the world. We've grown to 320,000 people worldwide. And we are, of course, supporting corporates and family business and bigger SMEs. But for us, scale-ups and startups are also really, really important. And the importance has increased over the last years tremendously. So for us, it is important to work with startups and scale-ups, and also with VCs and Ps all around the world. And my job as a head of startup at EY is to spread the word that we are also working with startups and scale-ups. And I have about 60 colleagues in different countries who are leading the EY startup practice there. So we are a globally connected network. We are a one-stop shop for consulting, from strategy to valuation to financing, tax, legal, whatever you need.
And if I remember one of our earlier chats, you also support startups actually in finding a corporate partner or finding also like an investor if they're with your advisory. Is that true?
I mean, this is another connection between EY and AWS, because we also are looking to connect and build bridges. And what we see is also from our client side that they really value when we bring cool startups to the table and collaborate in certain projects, especially when it comes to digital transformation or sustainability. So this is something we are doing quite heavy. And I had a lot of conversations today where we already discussed potential collaborations in projects.
Okay, Florian. So I feel actually, my gut feeling is you really burn for your topic, and I've met you in a few events, and we collaborate on some of those events, and I always seen you like talking to people till the late of night and really, really burning for the topic of startups and scale-ups. And what you did with the Scale-Up Award is an amazing job. So thank you very much on that. But actually, it's enough of emotions, because you actually promised me to bring some dry figures for investment in Europe and Austria. And yeah, actually, what about the trends? I think you should, let's do the serious stuff.
What's better to compete the bar at the end of a long day than some dry figures and charts?
I'm going to kill them in the background, so I'll leave the stage, I'll leave my chair, you take over, and we chat afterwards about the figures.
Yes.
Before we rock in with the startups. Thank you.
So I want to kick off with some insights and figures, and to close this day before we go to the startup pitches. I mean, at EY, we are constantly analyzing the investment landscape and the startup landscape worldwide, in Europe and in Austria. So we have a lot of surveys, and we are publishing them regularly. And I prepared only a few insights, looking back to what happened in 2021, what happened in the first month of 2022, and maybe a little glimpse in the glass bowl, what could happen now, since the economic surrounding is changing, since we have to expect a recession. So what does this mean for startups worldwide, and especially in Austria? And this is something I want to talk about in the next 8 minutes. So the management summary from a global and a European perspective could be: we had a record year in 2021 all over the world, so the valuations and volumes skyrocketed, fueled by cheap money, fueled by investment pressure and a lot of liquidity. This continued the first month of 2022. And then in the last couple of months, I would say March, April, and May, we've seen a slowdown and a downturn. The drivers for this are clear, and this is a combination of several drivers. So we have rising interest rates, we have rising inflation, we have rising uncertainty, we have economic slowdown everywhere around the world. And of course, we have falling tech stocks, and this affects the startup and scale-up market heavily. But as always, this is a too simplified management summary, so it's much more complicated, and we have to differentiate, and this is what I want to do in the next slides. So if we take a look back to 2021, this was a record year, and I think we all heard about it. We told this several times, or I told this several times, also in different media formats. So as you can see on the left and on the right side, or maybe the right side is much more important, the total financing volume increased to 88 billion euro. Yeah, which is an increase of 141%, and this is as much as in the 3 years 2018, 2019, and 2020 combined. And also the number of financing rounds, this was a moderate increase, but it was an increase by a fourth. So we can see that the interest was very high. The developments were mainly driven by VCs and PEs coming from the US, coming from Asia, with enormous investment pressure that meets cheap money and an attractive startup class, of course, especially in Europe, and this is what we have seen in Austria as well. I come to Austria in a few seconds. So if we take a close look at the countries, I think what's important is on the top, and what's important is Austria in this regard. So in a country comparison, UK is still in its own league, and this won't change over the next years. Yeah? Germany and France also had a really good development. Overall, the volume and the number of rounds increased in every country except for Italy, among the top 15. These are the top 15. And Austria improved from 16th to 11th place with a five-fold increase to approximately 1.2 billion euro. What does this mean with regards to the average deal round? Because it's also an important indicator for the valuations of startups in Austria, and this is what we're talking about. So the results I've presented so far show that the financing volume skyrocketed. We had a moderate increase in the number of rounds, and this means a much higher average financing round in Europe in 2021. And this was much higher than in the previous years. So overall, the average round size increased from, or almost doubled, from 6.9 million euro to 13 million euro in the last year. And as you can see, Germany, in comparison to the previous slide, Germany is tops here. So they had the biggest average deal round. And Austria also here on this slide ranks at place 11. Yeah? So Austria has also doubling and moved to 11th place. Before proceeding to 2022 and the current development, let's take a closer look, one last closer look at Austria and see where the money invested is coming from, because this is important when we talk about where it could go in 2022 for Austrian startups. These are the 2021 figures, but the structure is almost the same every year. So what we can summarize, and this is the chart on the right hand, the bigger the round, the less Austrian investors are involved. Yeah, we know that. And if we ignore this one single Series D for a second, then we can see that the proportion of Austrian investors decreases with each growth phase. And this is underlined by the chart on the left. So as we can see, 75% of the volume invested in Austrian startups in 2021 came from purely international investor groups, and only 2%, is the small pie on the top, 2% from purely Austrian investors. That means still that Austrian investors are mainly financing the first steps, planting the seed, and that foreign investors are financing growth and are harvesting the fruits in case of success, of course. And this is important to know when we switch to 2022. As stated in the management summary in the beginning, we see at least a slowdown of the boom on a global scale. So after a strong start to the year, there was a significant decline in March, April, and May. In particular with regards to mega rounds of more than 100 million euro. Why is this? Tech stocks have fallen massively, which is why scale-ups don't want to go public, or it's not a good environment to go public at the moment. So especially for scale-ups and unicorns, this is a difficult situation because in the current surrounding, in some cases, there will be down rounds, the valuations will fall. It's much more difficult to invest growth and to fuel growth with mega rounds. So of course, it's also not a good sign when scale-ups like Klarna or Gorillas have to let people go. And at the moment, and this is important to know, at the moment, the biggest downturn effect that we're seeing hits some well-funded startups and especially scale-ups and unicorns in the US and also in Europe, which are depending on hyper growth. How does Austria look like? In 2022, so far, pretty good actually. So the year 2022 was quite good so far. I mean, this is with reference date end of May, so yesterday. So we have still 1 month to go. And as you can see, the number of deals will approximately be quite the same as last year, where we had 67 deals in the first half. And the number and the volume, as you can see here, is even higher than in the last half year. So we don't see a major slowdown in Austria so far. We will see if this trend is keeping up in the next months. So what's the outlook for Austria? I think it's a good example that I've read yesterday. So when an American VC was asked how he expects the global startup investment landscape to develop, he said something interesting. He said, it's depending on the trigger, and you need to differentiate between FOMO and fundamentals. What does he mean? He means that especially in the early stage, a lot of investments are driven by the fear of missing out. So you have a great founding team, you have a great idea, you believe in the potential, and this is where investments are still coming in. And as we've seen in the past, also during recessions, the investments in the early stage were keeping up and sometimes even increased. So in the short term, there's not to be expected a slowdown in the early phase. The second part is fundamentals. So when the going gets tough, startups and investors go back to fundamentals. You know, how much does it cost to acquire a customer? What's the lifetime value? How fast do you burn money? And amid the current uncertainty, we are expecting startup valuations to come back to earth, to get lower, and companies to slow spendings. And this is what we will see, especially in later stage startups, in scale-ups, and in unicorns. So this means, to sum up, the higher the growth stage, the stronger the decline, because it's closer to the stock market. And as mentioned, unicorn with a very tough hyper-growth path and a pressure to scale are much more affected. And when it comes to markets, it's especially overheated markets. I mean, it's always a question of definition. What is an overheated market? But it's overheated markets that are in danger. And I think Austria, despite a good development and despite 3 unicorns, is definitely not overheated. So I don't expect a major decrease in the coming month besides bigger rounds. Happy to discuss.
Thank you very much, Florian. I roll over to you back, and I'll kindly ask the crowd in the very back to join us in the front or go upstairs, because it's really hard to focus here on stage. Kindly, I beg you. But Florian, actually, there were a few things that triggered me. In the end, just to get with this whole type of crisis thing is coming up, if I got you right, you said, well, it will hit the market, the hyperscaling market actually, but Austrian startups, scale-ups, they're kind of more revenue-based actually. They have good business models, and if I understand you properly, they're fine, so they will keep growing and having good investment rounds.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very short and simplified summary. But yeah, as I said, in Austria, also investors are looking at startups and looking at the numbers and KPIs and fundamentals. more than they are doing in other countries, especially when it's overheated and there is a lot of competition for investments. I mean, that's not so much the case in Austria as it is in other countries. So I think investors take a very close look. And if you have a solid and good business model, if you have the fundamentals or the potential to deliver these KPIs, then you will still get investments. And the valuations in Austria, they increased in the last years, but not to a level that we see in other countries. So I don't expect the valuations to break down.
So we are still real in Austria, I would say. Great. Maybe one last question is like, remember your kind of the barometer and the report, and it was like last year that the early rounds, the pre-seed and seed rounds below 1 million actually, and that's the sweet spot for us in AWS i2 Business Angels, is actually they went down, although the market skyrocketed, and there was like a figure, it's kind of repairing this year, it's getting up again. Can you get a bit more detail on that?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it is the common saying is in Austria we have a great structure when it comes to early stage, and that's true, especially due to FFG and AWS, of course, but also due to a lot of business angels who have a crucial importance for the startup ecosystem. And what we've seen in the last 2 years, so 2020 and 2021, there was a slight decrease in the early stage rounds, and this year, interestingly, it gains speed again and it increases again. So I mean, we don't have to take it for granted that we have good structure in the early stage. So this has to be earned, and we all have to work on this together, especially focusing on business angels who are bringing in smart money, which is extremely important for the first steps. So we all know that we need more growth investors. That's also a common saying. But let's not forget about the early stage rounds.
Very nice words, and we're coming up now with the early stage. Thank you very much, Florian Haas, Head of Startups with EY.
Thank you.